Everyone is well, fit and well. Delighted to run this session with you. Hopefully, so many people online at the moment that maybe one or two of you have come through one of my sessions before. If you have, let me know. That'd be great. Yeah, but I'm Mike. We'll run this session, it'll take probably 30, 40 minutes, something like that, because very keen to have some interaction, of course, from you. Clearly, this is our third week, probably most of our third week into this kind of work, unless you've done it before. My background is, dare I say, a bit of military and a bit of sales. So as salespeople, we're quite used to being a little bit isolated and bashing out the calls, locking ourselves away, working remotely. Often, if we're on the road, working from a car or something like that, or a Starbucks or other outlets like that. So for many of us, it's new. So we titled this "Remaining Productive when Working from Home," because I feel sure that many of us, you've got into a routine, and so you'll probably have you've got your own way, still struggling a little bit with getting to grips with concentration, focusing on the important stuff, which we'll talk about during this session. And of course, the distractions that happen along the way as well. So trying to control some of those. I'd quite like, and actually if there are any neuroscientists that have tuned in, I'll be very pleased to have your help, because I'd like to talk a little bit about, from my understanding of how our brain can just go into a kind of warp drive and overload as we take in so much information, and sometimes information, of course, that we're not aware, we've never really experienced before, and so it sort of clouds our thinking. So I'd like to kind of talk about that. So it's a little bit of an inside-out approach when I look at managing time or managing ourselves. I like to make sure that it's almost from our head before we get into the tips, if you like, or hacks, as they call them these days, as to managing ourselves a little bit better. So I'm really pleased if you want to chip in along the way today, or just sit and listen and see whether or not there's a big tick in your box, i.e. you're doing stuff really well and following some of the tried and tested methods, or there are one or two ideas that you think, well, actually, that might make a difference for me. So you put that in place, and possibly it generates a good outcome from you. I'll throw that one in because later on in the presentation stroke session, we'll talk about the 80-20 and Pareto and focusing on the right stuff. So bit of a smile initially. So I think probably many of us remember Robert Kelly back in 2017. And I thought it was quite interesting because actually we're all learning. It's way before where we are now, of course. And we're not alone. And poor old Robert Kelly probably was a kind of vanguard for some of the stuff that we sometimes, I suppose, take for granted these days, where the cat jumps up on the computer, or somebody walks through in the background. I was quite interested to see on the BBC, I think it was today, I think it's Jonathan Ashworth, I think that's his name. He was doing an interview and his wife popped in behind the door, even this morning as he sat in his kitchen, I think it was his wife, and then quickly sidled away. So the idea there is actually to not get too worried about it, and I'm sure many of us have found our own way and made some kind of faux pas along the way as well. I read another one the other day, which was quite interesting. That you read that one. Hopefully, this person wasn't injured as he sort of tumbled down the stairs, but that sort of thing often happens. Gurgle, gurgle, I thought that was quite nice as it went into the bath. So what we do is, we mute, so thank you very much for that. We turn off all that heavy breathing, sniffing, coughing, dogs and doorbells. But actually, as I was saying earlier today, unmute if you've got something that actually will help us along the way today. So that would be nice. So moving on, what we would like to cover today is, looking at the continuous flow of information potentially exploits our minds. So we're often exhausted, I don't know about you, but exhausted at the end of the day simply because we have got all of this stuff firing into our head. So I want to talk about that initially and some of the bit of the neuroscience that I know anyway that we can at least think about and practice a little bit of control over in order to make sure that we don't have information overload or our minds just stuff full of stuff, so that we can stay in the present and focus on what we should be trying to achieve. So productive, connected, some of that stuff that you might have discussed before. Routine and trust I want to talk about. So trust as in, people trusting us to get the work done, us trusting others if you're leading people, and some of the practical tips, tricks, hacks, that sort of stuff. So Q&A, so tips from you, please, along the way. So benefits of remote working. What have you found so far? Just a quick question, put it out there. Some of the stuff that actually is working for you, maybe a couple of chats, throw some messages out there, or unmute and contribute. What have you found so far? No commute, I think it's amazing. Did somebody, just on the no commute thing, did anybody read how much the CO2 emissions has supposedly gone down? I think I did. Yeah, more webinars for personal development, not having to commute again. 2 hours, yeah, save time, 2 hours in the car. You either put those 2 hours into more productivity, or a walk, or a run, or a cycle, or more time with family, that sort of stuff. Yay, more biscuits. Be careful about the biscuits. Tea breaks. Yeah, I like that one. Actually, that's a really nice one. So I'm lucky to still have the opportunity to work at all. My wife has furloughed part of her staff, and some aren't. And initially, the non-furloughed were really aggrieved, but actually, over the last week or so, the non-furloughed are very happy to be at work, and the furloughed are going, actually, are there any opportunities that we can come back and do still? So yeah, haven't set the alarm for 6:15 in over 3 weeks. Yes, but we'll talk about that. Hopefully, you've set the alarm at a decent stage, but you do get out of those pajamas. Going to talk about that later. Great. More exercise. Have you focused on, a target for exercise? Many of us, certainly me, focused on making sure that I have a target to maybe lose a bit of weight, tone up a little bit, and do things perhaps sometimes I haven't done before. But great, better tech skills at the end of this, hopefully. Yeah, actually, we're better at doing these webinars and stuff like that at the end of this. So I think that's great. So thank you so much for all of those. Some of the stuff that I thought was useful as well is that extra productivity, really rewarding. Because you can, and we'll talk about it, get so much done and actually have a little bit more time to spend on nicer things. If you don't I see work as a nice thing as well, but we do separate the two. So safe and flexible, we can stay. Yeah, we've got meeting rooms all the time, so keeps work moving. So business continuity, one of the things that obviously is, for me, somewhere in my brain, not let it kind of roll forward too much, is this idea of making sure that we have that balance between, of course, remaining healthy, but keeping the economy going. And I think it's so important that actually we are able to operate like this. We are able to adapt. And I think as humans, we are so good at adapting. And it's just incredible how everybody has engaged in this and getting that work-life balance right, not feeling guilty. And actually sometimes, and I think you've probably got an agreement on it, you stretch your day. You might then say to me, hang on a minute, Mike, isn't that worrying if you start to do some work at the end of the day and into the evening? Well, actually it's what works for you. And because sometimes you want to spend a little bit more time during the day because it's the day, and you have that time at the end to do a little bit of work. If that actually works for you and your colleagues, then it doesn't matter, because actually we can stretch our day a little bit. And that's my point of that last one, we get work done at any time. So they were the good things. Challenges, anybody? What challenges do we have? Probably quite a few. Yeah, 3-year-old. Ooh. I'm actually challenged still, and I was talking to Sarah about this, with a 23-year-old. So the 3-year-old, I get it. 23-year-old, it doesn't stop. So it's gone up now on my page, but thank you, whoever put the 3-year-old. Hungry husband, hungry kids, hungry everything. No cycle commute, but you can still cycle, be careful. But obviously you can. Looking out of the window on a sunny day, that's a challenge, because actually it can distract you, but it's nice to do. Yeah, feeling guilty making a cup of tea. Well, actually just put a little message on your screen, go, I'm off to make a cup of tea, because obviously we need to do that as well. Health and well-being. So that's a check-in. So along the way, we need to make sure that we're checking in all the time. Interaction with in person with colleagues. It's really hard, isn't it? Not having that, not pressing the flesh, if you like, and saying hello. But it'll end. It's not forever. And avoiding distractions. So let's look at avoiding the shopping challenge. So let's look at avoiding distractions along the way. So as I say, feel free to office banter. Yeah. So actually, we'll talk about chat rooms a little bit later on office banter, keeping those open, because you sort of need that along the way as well, because we don't meet people necessarily face to face. We don't have that office banter. Maybe keep a little chat room open. But as I say, I'm going ahead of myself a little bit. So somebody put there, and thank you for putting that, about kind of distractions. So this is where I really wanted to start looking at information overload and kind of what exploits our mind. And actually, I think in our current situation with a little bit of the unknown, we get so much information and those distractions that actually it does exploit the tendency for us to protect ourselves from, say, threats. So I wanted to kind of look at a little bit of that. So the impact of information overload as we get so much of this news feed coming through. And actually we can help ourselves, but we're constantly getting these news feeds at the moment. It's a little bit worrying, of course, because we've got our leader a little bit incapacitated at the moment, so we have that in our mind. But at some stage we've got to put it to one side. So we get this idea of global recession is around the corner, game over. I saw this one, I thought, what? Game over? Surely not. And actually, as soon as I started looking at it, I was thinking, well, no, because now that's playing with my mind. All this stuff about health, really important, obviously, to make sure that we stay and remain healthy. But some of this stuff we can't control. And of course, falling markets and things like that, we're all affected. Some clearly more than others, but we've all got pensions. But we can't control that because we can do a little bit about it, but actually it's slightly out of our control. And so we need to focus on what is within our control. And for me, anyway, is to really make sure that we are in control of three things. And I think the current pandemic has really exploited, from what I understand, three key areas of our mind. So for me, the challenge is trying to stay focused. You might say, actually, we're talking about being productive here. Well, actually, this is what I mean about the inside-out approach. Because actually, if we can control some of the stuff that we're actually doing, and actually control this kind of information overload, which actually kind of sets our minds on steroids, if you like. If actually we can create some space in our thinking that enables us to practice some of these personal effectiveness tried and tested tips, then actually we might go some way a little bit further in order to be more productive and get more out of the working day, or get more out of the day, let's say, not even working day, the day itself, whatever we choose to kind of chop it out. So the challenge. So the three areas are three areas that we will not be. It won't be new to us. Is the kind of mind-wandering negativity bias and uncertainty aversion. So anybody want to unmute and throw a couple of those at me as kind of what happens when our mind wanders or we get that negativity bias, uncertainty aversion? If you don't, I'm just going to take a sip of water, that's all. And then I will just explain a couple of them, all of them. So mind wandering. So it's not difficult to understand that when actually we get so much information. So if you've got your news feeds on, if you've got the television on in the kind of foreground or background, if you've got people, and actually it's incredible how many of us do this. My sister is the worst at it. She's kind of pinging me information about stuff that she hears here, there, and everywhere that actually just drip feeds into my head. And I go, oh, okay, that's quite interesting, because she's planted a little idea in my head. The temptation is to go, okay, I'll find out a little bit more about that. But suddenly I've broken my concentration and my mind starts to wander. So the idea here, as I say, is information, that, information overload will start to take your mind out of the present. So you remember back in the good old days when we were working from offices, where somebody like me or somebody that's actually coaching you within the office would say, actually, if you're focused on a piece of really important work, go find yourself one of those hard to find offices to lock yourself away in and focus on that part of the project. If you need 1 hour to focus on a specific area of a project, well, actually go and lock yourself away. And many people say, well, actually, Mike, I can't, because actually we don't have that space. So some people say, well, actually, I can put some headphones on and things like that. So it's quite interesting, where we're trying to not get distracted. We need to find one way of trying to focus. I quite like that. I realized they've just got a message through. There was an irony that I was trying to work on Excel whilst listening to this webinar. While you were talking about distractions, I have closed Excel and becoming focusing now. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Leave your personal mobile phone in another room so you don't get distracted. Well, that's great. At night, we're told to turn our phones off. I'm guilty of not turning it off. My wife is very good at turning hers off, which is great because she leaves the sound on. I leave mine off. Close Outlook for a while. Brilliant. Switch off notifications on team chats, emails, etc. Yeah. I switched my sister off on her WhatsApp chats because when I'm focused on some work, I just don't need it. It's just too distracting. Negativity bias, anybody? Somebody said I only have 10 minutes of news a day. Brilliant. I read actually that just stop watching the news and actually don't go for the 10 o'clock news, because what it would do is just feed your mind with negativity. Certainly at the moment anyway, because we're looking for those positive chinks. When you don't need to. Difficult to do sometimes when you're the boss. These are critical times we need to be available. Yeah, I think availability is absolutely right. I think that Judy, when you're still focused, if you're, the point we'll come to later on is actually when you need to focus on some work, I think that's information. So if you let people know that you're unavailable for that hour or something like that when you're doing a burst, and I'm going to talk a little bit later on about doing a burst of activity called Pomodoro. Some people will know about it. These days we talk about it almost as an agile approach to project management, where we work in sprints. Well, we'll look at some ideas to work in sprints based on managing our time and being productive. Just watch the 5 p.m. update. I love that. That's brilliant, because actually you'll get most of your information there. And pick it up in the morning, check what's gone on, and away you go. Danger clearly of that is it starts to feed your mind straight away. But we've got to have some information. So the idea there is just to control it. Negativity bias, anybody? Just seeing what's coming through.
I've heard negativity bias is...
I don't want my manager to be available 24/7, yeah, because it makes me think they expect me at the same time, yeah. Go on.
There's a suggestion that it's good in a hostile environment. You're kind of alert to kind of problems, but in this relatively benign environment, it actually counts against us.
Yeah, because yeah, it sort of does and it doesn't. So you know, it's designed obviously as a threat. We're always looking for a threat as human beings, and everybody knows about fight, flight, flee, and all of that sort of, and freeze. And I think that, you know, we have that focus on the negativity simply because we see sometimes as those as the threats that we should deal with. When things are going well, and actually we don't need to worry too much, but we're always on the alert. You know, if you go past, you know, a type of dog, for example, that you associate with being aggressive simply because, you know, everybody associates that dog with being aggressive, then of course you will step, you know, a couple of paces to one side of that dog simply because you're on alert, you know, because it's a negativity bias that actually is working in your head. The other thing is actually you could have a fantastic day, and one of us or one of your colleagues or something like that, somebody just mentioned Pomodoro. Nancy, thanks. I'll come to that in a minute. And thank you for the link as well. So you could have a brilliant day, and then somebody says something negative to you or comments on a piece of work that you've done. Actually, quite often, because of our negativity bias, when all things being equal, that will just blow the good day out of the water, simply because you've had that threat to one thing or another, status, ego, or the piece of work that you thought was brilliant. So actually, we're always looking out for those as well. And when we have negativity creep into, you know, our minds, we start to focus on that. And again, that becomes a distraction. Slightly, the slight alternative to that, if you like, is uncertainty aversion. So our minds, I'm going to read something. So just to go back to negativity bias, sometimes we can catch ourselves feeling guilty for taking breaks or overanalyzing situations, dynamics at work. It can be difficult to get out of that mindset, but at the moment, everyone is in the same situation. We need to be mindful of looking after each other. Absolutely brilliant. Job security distraction. Well, you know, and actually that's quite a good one. And it's not feeding into this webinar presentation at the moment, but actually many of us understand the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So Chantal, when you talk about job security, my recollection is actually that's the second hierarchy of need, where we focus on security. What sometimes that does, of course, is distracts us from, and quite rightly, focusing on, you know, the top stuff, like, you know, driving forward and being productive, self-actualization, if you like. So that can be a big distraction. So again, if we avoid information overload, we start taking some of that negativity bias out. The other thing that, you know, really plays on our minds, and this situation, it really exploits all of this, is uncertainty aversion. Because of course, as humans, we like to know, you know, what's going on in the future. And I don't know if anybody saw Simon's presentation a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, where he was talking about, you know, what do you do in situations that are sort of unknown? And he said something like, well, actually, I say to my team, we've actually done this before, so we can do it again. But in this instance, we haven't done it before. And actually, we're into kind of, as far as, you know, certainly I can remember, I can't go back, I can read about it on Spanish flu and things like that, but actually this is unknown territory, and that's why it will exploit the mind. So what? So actually this perfect storm to distract us, we need to control, and that's my only point on this one, is actually find ways to, you know, control some of the feed and information that you actually get. And I love your comments, thank you so much, where you're saying, well, actually I only watch the 5 o'clock update. I try and keep information, you know, to a minimum as I'm focusing in on the information, or sorry, the work that I should be doing. So it's just understanding how you can control the information so that you can stay in the present, work on what's important. I'm going to take another sip of water if anybody wants to contribute. So where do we go from here then? So we start to go, okay, well, if we control information, the idea then is that we've got a little bit more headroom, if you like, or headspace to focus on actually being productive and being connected. So this next bit, what I'd like to look at is just some stuff that you're probably doing already, but actually it might ignite a few comments about staying productive and how you're connecting with colleagues in the workplace. So, you know, the productivity bit, we all love to do that occasionally. That's probably for me a kind of a Saturday morning type mode rather than an everyday working mode. So being productive, I've got a few points that I'll make there, is actually create a routine. So I know that people, you know, will get up at a certain time and, you know, move around. But the idea then is to get into that work mode, ditch the pajamas and get dressed. At least that gives you that mindset that you're moving into work. I'm going to come back to these as well. Structure, so your day that you create kind of 1 to 3 daily action items. I actually read the other day that some people are saying just one thing a day. Well, 1 to 3, I think we can probably handle some more than one, but actually people were saying get focused on one, at least one. I assume, so when we look at structure, eat the frog, yeah, and actually somebody say eat the frog, do your hardest tasks first. Well, yeah, do your biggest one, your hardest one. If you tackle that one first, then of course the other ones are going to be a little bit easier to do. One or two of you would have come across Stephen Covey's big rocks, little rocks, and that kind of analogy, if you like, as to some of the tasks. Well, I'm going to get us to visualize or do some sort of look at some visuals on that later on. But this is all connected. So you say, okay, well, I really need to focus on some of the, you know, the really important stuff. I need to clear my head so I can focus. Those 1 to 3 daily action items, they need to go into your calendar, okay? So that you need to block time out of your day. And I know people go, oh, what do I do? You know, what do I do? I know this stuff. But actually, it's really important because actually you will get to that time where, assuming you're following your calendar, you'll go, well, I need to be focused on a specific piece of work. You might have managed expectations saying, look, I'm going to go deep dive now into a specific piece of work, so I'm out of contact. Well, actually, I think that, you know, if you're managing expectations, I think that's the relevant bit. Surely the list quantity will depend on the work associated with each task. Absolutely. But actually, because you're going to break that task down, but actually systematically build it into a process or a plan in order to find your big three, if you like, as you're going through your day. Some people move around the house if you're lucky enough to have a little bit of space in your house, because somebody said earlier that, you know, some of the challenges is actually you look out the window and actually it's sunny. Well, actually that can be positive as well, because it changes your outlook, your viewpoint. Even looking out of the window, I can see some of you, actually you can swivel your chair around and look out of the window. So movement's actually very good. And staying relaxed. So stress management is personal. Avoidance can be a positive stress reducer. So you're avoiding all that information and taking your regular breaks. So people say every 45 minutes where you press the refresh button. Well, that's all about concentration. So some of us are saying don't fall into the trap of booking back-to-back meetings or video calls, because exactly that, you need your break. So a little stretch, a little, you know, in the office. And again, this is not universal, but it's typical. We'll get up after we've concentrated on a piece of work, and we will go and make a cup of tea or coffee or something like that, or water. And actually, that's what we sort of need to replicate along the way. So back-to-back meetings, these meetings can be very tiring, can't they, online? Because typically it's a different medium for us. Obviously, we're global these days, so we're sort of into it in any case, and we're used to say some of this stuff, but actually we're not used to it all the time. That's the difference. Clearly that's work dependent. So don't feel guilty. Take a break. Typically, we say every 45 minutes because our concentration level obviously dips after a while. And if you looked at kind of dipping concentration level, often people say after about 20, 25 minutes, our concentration level starts to dip. That's why when we're coaching people, we say, okay, well, change the medium as to, how you're getting information across to them, because that brings them up a little bit because it's something slightly different. And that's what we need to try and replicate at home, because we're trying to replicate as much as we do back in the workplace. So that's just some ideas. Somebody says, I love the eat the frog comment. It is so true. I think it's Mark Twain, wasn't it, that had that comment. Someone will probably correct me, but I always associate eat the frog with a Mark Twain comment. But it is so true. So I'm going to move on to kind of being connected. So good to kind of be connected. And I think that many of us, we've spoken about, say, some of this before, but it's important to stay connected. One of the things I find actually very interesting is this idea of trust. So many of you will be managers, many of you will be being managed, but we're all leading. And this is a really favorite topic of mine, is the difference really between leadership and management. And I find that here, at this stage, those of you that are leading or have leadership in your role, which is many of us, have to lead. We have to, sometimes put the doing down and just go, okay, I'm just going to do a little bit of leadership. I'm going to connect with people. I'm going to, talk to them about some of the work that they're doing. And I know you're probably all doing this, but let's go through the talk process. Because for some people, if they don't get that connection, it's hard for them to show vulnerability remotely, because they're either kind of stewed up in their own minds, because we'll have that kind of out of contact time, and actually sometimes it's quite a long time. So it's quite hard for some people to show vulnerability. So we need to check in regularly, because we're losing that human connection. That connection that some of you were saying is a challenge earlier. So again, replicate it. Many of you probably do that half an hour chat at the end of the day, do you? Get that chat room open and actually talk. But sometimes don't talk about work. Talk about, if you haven't got that chat room kind of semi-distracting us during the day, which we have to control, we certainly build it in at the end of the day so that we open it up and we can chat about some of the stuff that you found quite amusing, some of the stuff that you're actually worried about, concerned about, or vulnerable about, and things like that. 3 weekly catch-up Teams calls. I think that's nice. And so everybody is, we would say a check-in. We have a daily e-coffee, not just work, life, and how everyone is doing. Check-in. Thank you very much. Grace actually saying check-in. I mean, it's a well-used term. Slack channel. Yeah, of course, Slack is very good. Not compulsory. Drop in and out. Not work-related. Brilliant. Okay, Lena, thank you. Anti-cabin fever quiz. Actually, that's fun. Takes somebody a little bit of time to create it, but keeps everybody tuned in. So this bit about here, keep communicating, the one in the middle. Mark, if we were available, busy, and actually what that is doing is making sure that people understand and you're managing their expectations as to what you're doing. So I think that's really valuable. Otherwise, people start to go, I wonder what they're doing. But we need to build that trust and connection. So it's great. Thank you for that feedback. It's brilliant. So someone's saying, give me the quiz. So can we find a quiz online? Almost definitely along the way. Okay, so that's that area of why we're doing it, some of the things that people are doing in order to stay connected, online social events, quizzes. And the last bit I'd like to do is just talk about some of these areas of how you can put some of this stuff into practice. So the pragmatists amongst us will be going, okay, well, what are the tips? What can I do? So if some of these are new to you, brilliant. If you've covered them all off before, keep practicing them, because actually don't forget the title for this one is remaining productive. whilst we're working from home, working remotely. So let's look at, say, some of them. And if you want to contribute again, feel free to do so. Many of us have heard of the 80-20 stuff, as I mentioned earlier on in the presentation. And again, it links into our 1 to 3 tasks. And this is, if you like, Pareto analysis, 80-20, law of the vital few, things like that. And actually this picture on the left-hand side where we say few vital tasks, these are the tasks that you actually need to identify, because generally if you do those specifically during the day or your week or however you've structured your time, then of course they're going to give you the big bang, the big bucks. The danger is actually we do all those kind of smaller tasks around the big chunky ones. And what you get there is the picture that I've faded a little bit on the right, but actually what we're coming to is actually your big rocks won't fit into your day because sometimes we've stuffed it with trivial stuff. So it says many trivial tasks. This is the idea of just simply writing your classic to-do list and actually picking the key things that you just want to put into your day. I have to say that, you know, and those of you that have met me before and done some face-to-face stuff, I firmly believe then you populate your calendar with these tasks. And so, and again, circadian rhythms we're going to talk about very shortly. You know, circadian rhythm will be the time of day that actually you're at your best. Clearly, we're scheduling these webinars, this webinar at 11 o'clock in the day because we're at our best, our most alert. So a little bit selfish, that's a joke, to actually make sure that we're focused in on this activity. But really find the stuff that's important for you. And again, in a minute, just feeding forward a little bit, we'll talk about the important urgent. I'm not going to do it in detail, but we'll talk about that as well. So find your vital few, put them into your calendar, and actually be disciplined enough to do it. Now, how long you're going to schedule your tasks for is simply up to you. But that's 80-20, and it gets its kind of ideas simply from, you know, a kind of a rule of thumb. You know, most of the land, you know, if you look at the name of the person, it's Italian, and actually thinking most of the land in Italy is, or 80% of the land in Italy is owned by 20% of the population. And it kind of works like that. 20% of the real stuff that we're doing will produce some good outputs. So that's what we need to look for when we are looking at our vital tasks. So Stephen Covey, many of us have heard of this. So I think that actually it's important that we understand the big rocks, little rocks thing, and actually understanding that we should put the big rocks in first. Everything else falls around that, and everything else can work around that. And it's a classic, you know, pushing back on some people when they say, can you have a meeting at a specific time? Well, actually, if you have your open calendar, you'll say yes, because actually there's nothing forcing you to say no. When you've populated your big rocks, something forces us to go, hang on a minute, I could say no to that simply because I'm going to have to rejig my calendar. If you have to rejig your calendar, rejig it. But it gives you that opportunity to say no. So this is like a private thing, just a couple of seconds. Could you just write down your big three, the 3 top big rocks that you need to work on this week, next week, longer term projects? What are your biggies? Share them if you want. Anybody not do a to-do list? Yeah, stories for is that a not? Yeah. Use stories for a new project. Love it. And actually, I think lots of people use that approach because actually you can see the picture building. It's very nice. So these are the things that actually are going to go into your system. So I'm going to move on because actually that's a private thing. Overhaul all team profiles. Lovely. And actually, if you think about that one, saying overhaul all team profiles, is that, you know, a top important role to do? Is that a medium important role to do? Is it urgent at the moment? No, it's not. It's a classic kind of mini project that we can start to break down and put into place and start to work through. So we start to go, many of us have seen the urgent important matrix, I would imagine. So the big three that I've just said, or your rocks, are the stuff that actually are of high importance to you. We need to keep those in our minds all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. Because ultimately, this is what you're going to get measured on. There are too many distractions. We've spoken about those already. Latest release, plan for next, self-development, love it. So actually you're prioritizing straight away. And this is what we're trying to do, is prioritize straight away. So clear our mind, focus on importance. At the end of the day, somebody is going to measure you on what's important, what they're expecting you to be delivering. And if you've gone, okay, well, I've been doing all of this other stuff that actually is lower importance, it will be questioned, and we'll question ourselves as well. So this matrix, you know, works on obviously not important, not urgent. You have to wonder what you're going to do there. Lower importance on the left-hand side, high urgency. You really got to question that stuff. And I'm going to populate this in a second anyway and give you some ideas. This is the green. I'll put it in green for go. These are the areas that you should be focusing in on. So the stuff actually, and it's quite nice to be able to work from home and work on some of these projects. But this is high importance for you. And now you should be then scheduling those in. So this stuff you can see coming. And actually, if you can see it coming, we have a remit to planning. Okay? Because of course, there'll be lots of this stuff that actually you can't see coming. So in the red area, this top right-hand box, typically, you know, this is a crisis. This is firefighting. And actually, it's excusable to, you know, jump onto these at the last minute. Got procrastination there, it's a bit of fun. But actually, it's last minute stuff. And actually, if you're working on this and it has to get done, but actually you couldn't see it coming, no one usually will question that. But actually, if that red bit has moved from the green, simply because you've been distracted, you've, you know, done things that actually are lower on your importance scale, you've been working, you know, not on your big rocks, then people will question it, simply because you'll end up working heavily in box 1. So the idea clearly is to prepare and plan, set goals, all that sort of stuff that typically would spend quite a lot of time looking at. But these are your big rocks. This is the stuff that needs to go in. And sometimes, again, I'm going to flick into leadership. I call it leadership by leaning back in your chair. Sometimes, you know, we push our chair back, and that's a bit of high importance and kind of low urgency stuff where you're just reflecting. And that's called conceptualization. So looking out of the window occasionally and thinking about whether you're on the right track, that's okay. Stuff down here, 3 and 4, just limit and avoid. So this is where we control our phone calls. We manage people's expectations. We don't take on everybody's minor issues. And we reject some meetings simply because it will affect your opportunity to work on the big rocks. Trivial tasks, busy tasks, irrelevant emails, manage and avoid. Many of you would have seen this before, I'd imagine. But we can come back to it. Pomodoro is taking, so you're green, okay, taking, oh, sorry, I won't go back or too far back, your tasks and breaking them down into sprints. So Pomodoro means that actually we've got a bit of work to do, and it got its name, my understanding again, if those of you who speak Italian, I think tomato is pomodori. I think this guy, Francesco Cirillo, got this idea by, you know, turning it to 25 minutes and going, okay, I have a task to do, let's sprint. And that's why I think it's quite nice, because actually it kind of links into that agile project management type approach of sprints that many of us are familiar with in any case. And I think it's a really good idea of going, okay, 25 minutes, sprint, do some work, take a 5-minute break. Do some work, sprint, 25 minutes, 5-minute break, things like that. So it's really quite a nice thing. There's not a lot more to say about Pomodoro technique, really. It is what it is, as they say. And I can see, you know, the sale of lots of Pomodoros. I sell them, by the way. No, I don't. You know, as we turn our egg timer or our you know, whatever timer we use. But it's a really good technique, and I've seen that, you know, some people have said that they use it and they love it, and it's great. So pop 25 minutes into your schedule rather than an hour. Last thing, okay, is when we are good. Okay, when we are good, we should do our best quality work. Okay. And this is all about sleep-wake cycle. This is all about when you're at your most alert. And this is all about doing, as I was saying here, and I'll say the Q2 stuff, when you're at your best. And I think that many of us, including us today, if you like, we're scheduled a meeting, you know, when most of us are at our best. And I would always say in the workplace, don't stick it down at, you know, well, depending on the meeting, of course, and how really important it is. But typically some of our meetings stick in after lunch, that sort of stuff, where we don't have to be high alert, and we're not using valuable time to get on with our key work, our quadrant 2 work, as we call it. I've started to catch up on my to-read list later in the afternoon. I've started to flag a bit, absolutely. And actually reading and staying up to date with some of your information, your product knowledge and stuff, medium to high importance, not that urgent until somebody asks you a question and you can't answer it and you think, actually, I better do more reading. But reading is a kind of routine type stuff, but actually depending on your job, and clearly the important bit depends on your job, that will determine how high you would put that on your importance list. Now, I stressed your, because then that's what creates some of the healthy negotiation, if you like, back in the workplace. Because don't forget, your high importance sometimes isn't somebody else's high importance. And that's where, when we're back in the office or when we're negotiating online, we have to negotiate. Because, you know, we know that if we're asking somebody to do something for us, it's not that important sometimes for them. And so they have to be in control of their own work. Because otherwise, if you remember, that might be falling in for them into quadrant 3, other people's minor issues or the stuff that we've left to the last minute. So for that's where I want to kind of leave and schedule stuff when you're at your best. And I want to leave, you know, a good few minutes for some Q&A or some ideas about how we can use some of this stuff before we say goodbye. So I'm going to open it up for some questions. The last bits I've covered really on that quadrant 2 matrix. It's called an Eisenhower matrix for some of you that want the references on some of those things. I've spoken about, you know, making sure that we understand what's important for us. We make sure that we put our big rocks in first. If you want to use Pomodoro, then actually put your 25, I'd say put 30-minute blocks into your day and go, I'm just going to burst on that. Tell everybody I'm unavailable for a little bit, but I'll be online, you know, later on. Then go for it. Started to catch up. Okay, excellent, great. And actually, it's all about important work. And I remember on one of the last sessions we had, that's what many people say, how do I stay focused? You stay focused on understanding what's important. You stay focused because you put it into your calendar. You stay focused because you say, I'm unavailable because I'm working on that stuff. People are, you know, that have children at home, again, I think that actually the 25-minute burst approach is probably quite a good approach to it, especially if you can, you know, find something for, if you're on your own looking after children, really difficult, but maybe if you can find something for them to do for, say, a short burst, then Pomodoro comes into its own and you do your short bursts, but you kind of stay focused. Of course, you may get distracted as well, but that is life and we just have to manage it. As as poor old Robert Kelly had to do back in 2017. Excellent. Any points or main distraction is children asking for snacks constantly. Again, we'll give them enough snacks for like a short burst, and then go and read to them or something, and then come back. But actually, people will understand. Good leadership is understanding, and actually, ultimately, from my point of view, as long as you achieve your task, as long as you get the job done, that's all people can ask for. I used to schedule exercise into my diary so that colleagues could see when I wasn't available. Yeah, do it again. Brilliant. Yeah. And actually that hour, and I'm not suggesting, it's only me, my preference is to go out and cycle. But an hour at lunchtime to go and cycle, hour and a half probably take me, hour and a half at lunchtime to go and cycle. I don't have children now that I have to kind of look after. So a little bit easier, I get that totally. But, I think that if you can do anything, then I think I just call that managing other people's expectations or understanding, giving them information, then their minds don't play tricks on them as to what we need to do. Set a number of snacks per day the kids can have. Actually, I put them on the fridge and they can tick them off. And actually, some people would save, or some, a couple of, I've only got 2, by the way. They would kind of save the good ones to the end. I think that's a nice idea as well. Everyone chooses their snacks for a day in Facebook. Kids need to learn to prioritize as well. Actually feed this stuff to them as well. I think that's really, really important. And actually, depending on how old your children are, it will help them with studies as well and things like that. Pomodoro is very good for studying because actually they get distracted. Not all, clearly I'm kind of generalizing, but many of them just get easily distracted anyway and say, well, just, for my boy Harry, just focus for 25 minutes on that and then take a break. And then, once you've done it all, put a big tick and then go gaming or something. Give yourself a reward afterwards. Any other ideas? Stuff that's new, stuff that actually you're going to build in, stuff that you're doing in any case. Urgent, important, coming up again. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Routine is vital. Sets a rhythm for you to focus on the work. Love the setting expectations. More specific on my calendar. Yeah. So imagine this is your calendar. Just build it in. And mental health. I think that don't forget to look after your own mental health is actually taking those breaks away. Realizing that actually there are some things that are more important, but actually if you do the key areas, then great. Lower expectations, managing lower expectations. More achievable to-do lists, set those, it's great. Ideas to improve focus. So don't forget to improve focus. You've got to take out where we started the start of the presentation. Is you've got to take out all the stuff that's getting in the way. It's distracting. So if we can manage to do that, easier said than done. I'm 100% on board with that one. But actually, as soon as we unclutter and control the news feeds, because actually many of us also say, well, actually, I need information. I need to stay connected. I need to stay right up to date with all the information. Well, I reckon, unless you're a day trader, then I don't think so. I think we just take that down, we scale that one down, because actually it doesn't always help. You need to 100% stay on your own game, but all of this stuff, not necessarily. Knowing what's really vital, not jumping onto or reacting to what's not important. I love that comment, Eleanor, and I think that actually such an important comment, and actually clearly it supports what we're saying here. Because then you'll be doing all of those little bits, if you like. Well, I'll go back to, I was going to go back to the sand, but it'll take me through the Q2 build. But actually, you'll be doing all that kind of trivial stuff, and you get distracted. So try to stay on what's important. Don't set over, tasks that actually you won't be able to achieve. be realistic with tasks. Thank you, you said it yourself. Maxine, brilliant. And don't beat yourself up if you can't achieve it all at once. Break it down. That's the frog, break it down, eat your frog, break it down, eat the elephant, all those sort of comments that actually we're talking about when we're talking about time management. And yeah, breaking it down, setting your calendar up, brilliant. TED Talks, yeah, lovely. Thank you for the link on TED Talks. I think some of them are great. Saying it's okay not to feel at your best, and many of us won't. But actually, we know when we're at our best. And I'll leave you clearly with, you know, back into the military, and of course, the time of day that you would prepare for an attack would be at 1 to 3 in the morning, and there's kind of no surprise that actually that's when we're not at our best. But actually, you know, unless you're into a sort of rota, and sometimes we get into that. So focus work when you're at your best. So I will say, lovely tips coming through. Thank you very much. And Zara will sort out the presentation itself. Thank you for your input. It's been amazing. Thank you for your concentration. And keep remaining productive, because I know you'll all be doing some fantastic stuff out there. Just tidy it up a little bit if you need to in some of the areas. And if you take the 80-20 rule and you like that premise, then of course doing that little bit extra should produce good results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was great. Lots and lots of really great tips there from you and from the chat as well. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if you missed it, I will be sending around a recording of the presentation and the actual presentation. And we can also send around the chat transcript as well, because there's lots of good links coming out there from you all. So thank you for that, and we can share those round. And thank you for all of your thanks that are coming in. That's lovely. Catch up on our website for some more webinars that we'll be hosting, about 2 or 3 a week, to keep you all engaged and interacting with the community. So that's really great. And thanks again to Mike. I'm going to end there. If you've got any more questions, do get in touch, and we can put you in touch with Mike or anyone else if you need to. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Have fun, stay safe, all that sort of stuff.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.